The One I Want by Cindy Kirk. Narrated by Amy McFadden. Chapter 1. June Parker decided she knew how Daniel had felt seconds before entering the lion's den. Fear sluiced up her spine. A tight feeling encircled her chest like a vice. Terror coursed through her veins. And a strange feeling of relief that something she dreaded, something that would test every ounce of her inner strength and outer stamina, was finally at hand. No more waiting and thinking of everything that might go wrong. Reality was now at her doorstep. Or, rather, at the doorstep of Ross and Margene Driscoll, her boyfriend's parents. Cameron, the love of her life who'd been assuring her all day that he'd primed his parents by telling them he was bringing her with him tonight, pulled his BMW to a stop in the circular drive. As he handed his key fob to the valet, another young man, looking professional in dark pants and a crisp white shirt, opened June's door and held out his hand. Cameron rounded the front of the vehicle and handed the man who'd assisted June a folded bill. Instead of heading immediately to the front door, which would no doubt open before they even reached it, June paused and took a moment to steady herself. Tonight's cocktail party was originally supposed to be an intimate gathering of family and friends at the penthouse of Cameron's grandparents, Johnny and Halcyon. It had been switched to his parents' home in the Denver neighborhood of Cherry Creek to allow for more guests. The event, a $1,000 per guest fundraiser for Anson Hawkins, Cameron's friend and a candidate for a seat on the Denver City Council, had attracted considerable interest among Denver's elite. According to Cameron, his parents' decision to cap attendance at 100 had been a strategic one. Not only would it make the event even more exclusive, it would allow them to treat their guests like royalty. Wine would flow freely, and delicious appetizers would be served all evening. The hope was that the silent auction items would draw in even more money for Anson's campaign. June glanced down at the white, cowl-necked satin slip dress she'd coupled with silver open-toed heels. To add an elegant touch, her necklace, a silver choker covered in sparkly stones, wrapped lovingly around her neck and shone brightly. "Thank you again for the necklace. I love it," June whispered, her fingers rising to her throat. "The jewels look amazing with your dress." Cameron gave a little laugh as he took her arm. "What am I saying? You look amazing." "You clean up pretty good yourself." Cameron wore a suit like he was born to wear one, but he really rocked black tie. He chuckled, and, as expected, two attendants sprang to open the doors to the home before she and Cameron had even drawn close. June's heart somersaulted when she saw Cameron's parents in the foyer beside Anson, greeting the attendees. Cameron had mentioned Anson's parents were in Italy now. For a brief second, June wondered if she and Cameron could have missed this receiving line if they'd arrived later. Then she reminded herself of two things. One, she wasn't a coward, though the way her hands wanted to tremble might indicate otherwise. Two, if she got this meet and greet over with now, she wouldn't need to think about running into Cameron's parents the rest of the evening. Cameron tightened his hold on her arm, letting her know without saying a word that they were a united front. Ross Driscoll, owner of the Denver Grizzlies football team and CEO of Velocity, a multinational corporation of all things dealing with athletics, smiled when he saw his son. His smile faded, but didn't quite disappear when his gaze rested on June. Ross, tall with a lean athletic build and thick dark hair peppered with silver, had eyes the same blue as Cameron's. Only his father's eyes were cool as he appraised June. Cameron's mother, Margene, had pulled her artfully streaked brown hair back in an elegant chignon. Her simple V-neck black dress likely cost more than June made in a month. The pendant around her neck was a large teardrop opal surrounded by diamonds. The warm smile that had lifted her lips when she saw her son froze when Margene spotted June. June didn't need an introduction. She'd met them both last year when she'd interned with Cameron's grandmother, Halcyon. Ross and Margine had paid her little mind at the time, until June had abruptly left for Paris and they'd learned Hal had given her $20,000. "Mother? Dad? You remember Jean?" Cameron spoke easily, but his blue eyes remained watchful. June liked the way Cameron occasionally still used the French version of her name, mostly when they were alone, though. They'd first met in France when her job as a global account executive for a multinational tech company had taken her to Paris. He'd been traveling between the London and Paris offices for Velocity, overseeing the divisions under the global sports marketing umbrella. For business, she went by Joan Dion. Otherwise, she was just plain June Parker, a name that he'd carefully avoided saying just now, knowing it would have his parents bristling. Though, to their credit, unless anyone was paying close attention, they wouldn't have noticed. "Ms. Parker?" Ross gave a polite nod. "Cameron told us you were coming tonight." "Cameron!" Anson spoke into the momentary void, a smile splitting his handsome face. This was the man of the hour. Anson had jumped into politics as soon as he'd turned 26, the minimum age required to run for a city council seat. After a 4-year term on the council, he would be old enough, at 30, to run for mayor. The money raised at tonight's party would go a long way toward paying for campaign ads in his hotly contested district. "You must be June." Anson extended his hand, his green eyes warm and welcoming. "I've heard so many good things about you. I'm happy we finally have the chance to meet." June gave his hand a firm shake, her eyes never leaving his face. She had so many questions for him about the night her sister was killed. But she'd agreed with Cameron that tonight would neither be the time nor the place for that discussion. "Good luck with your campaign," she told him. "If I lived in your district, I'd definitely vote for you." Anson laughed. "I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. My answer is always the same. My district is a great area to live in, so you might want to consider moving." "I'll give that some thought," June said. Cameron clapped his friend on the back. "We're going to get something to drink and check out the silent auction items. I'll catch up with you two later." Anson's gaze shifted from Cameron to June. "A pleasure meeting you." Smiling, June wiggled her fingers, thankful Cameron's parents were engaged in conversation with an older couple, allowing her and Cameron to stroll off without further interaction. Cameron smiled when she took a glass of white wine, instead of red, off of a passing waiter's silver tray. "I thought you preferred red." "I do." She absently sipped the Pinot Grigio and found the light-bodied and crisp flavor very much to her liking. "Then why go with the Pinot Grigio?" She gestured with her free hand to the white silk dress. "Out of love for this dress, my lips will not touch anything red tonight." His quick grin told her he recalled an earlier conversation where she'd sworn, based on past experiences, that anything red always ended up spilled down the front of whatever she was wearing, especially if that clothing was white. "Shall we check out the silent auction before we grab something to eat?" June left the decision up to Cameron. His parents' home, his friend's fundraiser, she was simply here to keep him company. "A lot of the items are quite pricey." A woman, her dark hair billowing like a dark cloud around her shoulders, stepped forward. "They might be a little above your means." "Oh, wait! I bet you can get Cameron to give you the money. That seems to be a particular talent of yours." "Nyla." Cameron's tone held a warning as he turned and met the gaze of his older sister. Conscious of the people on all sides of them, he lowered his voice. "We've been through this. Gran assured you, and me, that she gave the money to June willingly. She wants to help her find the person who hit and killed her sister." "I know that's what Gran said, Cam." Nyla's brows drew together. "But it doesn't make sense." "Neither did marrying me." The handsome blonde man at Nyla's side spoke in a cheeky tone. "You did it anyway." June watched Nyla shift her attention to her husband, Darren Flock. Nyla cupped Darren's cheek with her hand. "Marrying you always made sense. How can anyone argue with marrying the one you love? Darren laughed. Your parents, for two. Then there's my dad and brothers and okay. Nyla lifted her long, elegant hands, palms out. A large diamond on her left ring finger winked in the light. Forget that analogy. Before you offer up another one, Cameron said to his sister, I'd like to introduce June to Darren. You already know her from when she was Grant's intern. Cameron made quick work of the introductions. June remembered Nyla being prickly the only time she'd met her, so her comments had come as no surprise. Darren seemed nice, June thought. He was another person she wanted to question about the night her older sister died. But again, out of respect for Cameron's family's event, she wouldn't do it now. Cameron had said he would help her. She trusted that, when the time was right, he'd facilitate a conversation with Darren. Nyla! Darren! A younger woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and a barely perceptible scar running down the side of her neck approached the couple, a bright smile lighting her face. Wearing a simple black dress and minimal jewelry, she skidded to a stop when she saw Nyla and Darren weren't alone. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. When she backed up, Nyla placed a staying hand on her arm. You're not interrupting anything. Nyla made quick work of the introductions. June learned the young woman was Trini Wysocki and that she'd recently started working for the Grizzlies organization. I got to know Darren and Nyla through a mentoring program. It was a flock initiative for first-generation college graduates. Trini smiled at the flocks. I learned so much from them, and I'm still learning. Nyla's grandmother, Hal, mentored me for a while, June said. It was a very worthwhile experience. Nyla placed a hand on Trini's shoulder. A woman alone has power, but when we work together and help each other rise up, we have impact. Totally agree. Gesturing to Nyla, Trini smiled at June. I'm going to make Nyla and Darren proud. You've already made us proud, Darren told her. I really appreciate you and Nyla allowing me to come tonight. Trini glanced around. And for loaning me out so I can work on Anson's political campaign. It'll be a valuable learning experience. Nyla's gaze narrowed on something, or someone, in the distance. She took Trini's arm. There's someone over there I want to introduce you to. I'll catch up with you. Darren brushed a kiss across his wife's cheek. It was great meeting you both. Trini gave a friendly wave as she followed Nyla through the crowd. Darren focused warm brown eyes on June. Perhaps you and Cameron can come out to our place in Morrison for dinner one night this week. June slanted a glance at Cameron and got a slight nod. I'd like that. Thank you. I'll be in touch, Darren told Cameron. When he turned to leave, June placed a hand on his arm. By the way, when you have a free moment, there's some research I'm hoping you can help me with. It involves someone you might know. Sylvester Allen? Went by Sly? Darren's brows pulled together. I don't believe I've heard that name since high school. Yes, it's about an event from about 10 years ago. June glanced at Cameron. Obviously, I don't want to take you away from the party tonight, but I really... Darren! He glanced toward where JR stood with his fiancée, motioning to him. Darren turned back and shot June an apologetic smile. I'm sorry, I need to go, but you've intrigued me. Let's talk soon. Absolutely. June flashed a bright smile. We'll chat another time. As Darren slipped through the crowd on his way to JR and Britt, June blew out a breath. I didn't mean to waylay him. It just seemed too perfect an opportunity. She'd come tonight fully prepared to be ignored, or worse. Instead, everyone had been remarkably civil. Cool, maybe, but civil. Not bad for the first time interacting with Cameron's family since going public with their relationship. You're doing great. Cameron slung an arm around her shoulders and gave her a squeeze. You're handling things better than I am. I saw that you were itching to jump into your protective Knight of the Realm mode with your parents and sister. Concern filled his eyes. It means a lot to me that you'd want to do that. Impulsively, she leaned up and kissed him gently on the mouth. Thanks.
I didn't get a chance to do anything, but if I can get a kiss for doing virtually nothing, the thought of what I might get for really stepping up excites me.
She laughed. You just being you excites me.
We never did make it to the silent auction tables.
Well then, what are we waiting for? Chapter 2. Eve, the youngest of the 5 Driscoll siblings, arrived fashionably late to the fundraising event at her parents' home. Knowing there would be photographers present, she'd stayed home, taking extra time with her makeup until it was perfection itself. As the founder of Eve Cosmetics, she had an image to project. She had an eye for makeup and a talent for application. In college, she'd started building her social media platform by demonstrating various techniques for makeup and hair. Eve was under no illusions that her resounding success was all her own doing, at least not in the beginning. Being pretty and the youngest daughter of a billionaire had given her instant notoriety. She would, however, take credit for parlaying those initial few thousand followers into millions. When she'd told her father that a degree in business and economics would serve her well, he'd agreed, thinking she planned to work for Velocity once she was out of college. He hadn't been pleased when she'd told him she planned to launch her own cosmetics line and that those plans were already in motion. Her heart had swelled with pride when he'd reviewed her business plan and told her he was impressed and she had his full support. Though her dad had high expectations of all his children, she had to admit that she'd experienced more of his softer side than her siblings. She wasn't sure if that was because she was the youngest or, as she liked to tease her siblings, his favorite. Her parents were protective and believed she was too young to get serious about any man. Eve knew they had her best interests at heart, but she had dated enough in college to know what she wanted in a partner.
Eve!
Strong arms wrapped around her from behind for a quick hug.
I'm glad you could make it.
She looked up, and there, corny as it might sound, stood the one and only man for her. Anson. Ignoring her own yearning, Eve stepped back instead of lingering in his arms. She brought a hand to her hair, rings glittering in the light, bright red fingernails drawing attention to lips painted the same vibrant shade. When his gaze lingered on her mouth, she felt satisfaction surge. She'd chosen the lip color because it was the first shade her company was launching. The fact that Anson appeared to like it was an added bonus. With one hand, she swept the room. This is a wonderful turnout. His green eyes surveyed the luxurious Cherry Creek mansion and the people mingling inside and on the terrace outside. His lips curved.
A good showing for $1,000 a ticket.
She looped her arm through his and gazed up at him. I believe you could have charged $5,000 and this house would still be full. He laughed.
Your parents set the amount and the attendance cap.
He stepped closer to Eve, lowered his voice, and brought his lips near her ear.
I appreciate their support, but you know me. I'm just as grateful for a $5 donation as a $5,000 one.
Then he stepped back. Eve instantly missed the closeness. Everyone loves you, Anson. Including me, she added silently. She was rewarded with another smile. Unlike many guys she knew, Anson didn't have an inflated ego or a sense of entitlement. Unusual, as he'd been raised in a family whose fortune rivaled the Driscolls.
The Party in the Park fundraiser next weekend will reflect more on the type of council member I want to be, he told her. I want to represent all the citizens of my district, not simply the wealthy ones.
Eve knew that Anson, as founder and director of Lighthouse, an organization that focused on interventions to optimize positive mental health in the city's youth, worked every day to make a difference. His dedication was only one of the many things she admired about him. You'll make a fabulous council member and mayor.
One step at a time. Anson turned to smile at two silver-haired men passing by. I'm glad you could make it this evening. I appreciate your support. I was just telling Jerome here that you have a bright future in politics. The older man's gaze slid to Eve, and he stared pointedly at her hand resting on Anson's arm. As long as you don't get distracted. For one crazy second, Eve nearly jerked her hand away, feeling like a little girl caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Or an older one on the sofa with her boyfriend who had his hand up her shirt when her parents walked in. Anson tightened her hold by pulling her arm closer to his side and covering her hand with his. Richard Elsner, I believe you know Eve Driscoll? Miss Driscoll, it's been a long time. The man smiled easily, with a warmth at odds with the look in his eye only seconds before. Your father tells me you graduated last spring with honors from Berkeley. We got interrupted before I discovered where you landed. Are you working for Velocity or the Grizzlies? Or perhaps JR has you at Lexico with him? When the Driscolls had recently acquired Lexico, a predictive analytics company, Eve's eldest brother had taken over as CEO. While she found what he did fascinating and hoped to avail herself of some of Lexico's services in the future, that wasn't where her passion lay. Actually, I'm launching my own cosmetics line this fall. Eve smiled brightly and wondered how many seconds it would take for disapproval to shine in the man's eyes. This guy was smooth. Politician smooth. A merest flicker was the only indication of his surprise. That's wonderful. I wish you only the best. Good luck with the Havelock Park project. Surprise skittered across Elsner's face. It's a small project. I'm surprised you're even aware of it. Small? Seriously? He obviously thought she didn't keep up with local news. Elsner's construction company, which had won the bid to build the park, was approaching $1 million over budget. His son's wife, a representative for the district where the park was located, had supported the deal. It was messy already and bound to get even messier. Denver is my hometown. What goes on here is important to me. A good memory for important details is essential in business and in politics. Eve glanced up at Anson. That's why I know Anson has a wonderful future ahead of him. He's got a terrific grasp of events and people, and he genuinely cares about making their lives better. As long as he keeps his eye on the prize, he'll go far. Elsner's eyes lit up. Appears your grandparents have just arrived. I've been wanting to speak with Johnny, but he's not an easy man to reach. If you'll excuse me. Elsner added a few social niceties before hurrying off. Get the hint, Elsner, Eve murmured in a low tone for Anson's ears only. If Pops is difficult to reach, it means he doesn't want anything to do with you. Anson snorted out a laugh. Truer words. Landon Rhodes is here. Eve jolted and realized Jerome Strong, Anson's campaign manager, had lingered behind them while Elsner strode off. He's hoping for a few minutes of your time, Jerome said. Anson glanced around the room. I don't see him. He and Tom Harvey are out on the terrace. I said I'd send you out. Eve recognized the names of two businessmen who were influential in Denver politics. When Anson cast a glance at Eve, Jerome smiled at her. I'll keep Eve company. We have some catching up to do. Eve gave Anson a little push. Go. I'll catch you later. Jerome, a balding man in his mid-40s, waited until Anson was out of earshot to speak. Though that phony smile remained on his lips, the look in his eyes reminded her of a snake assessing its prey. May I speak frankly? Eve wasn't sure why he bothered to ask. By the gleam in his eye, he would go ahead with or without her permission. While she knew Jerome had a reputation as a political genius, she didn't particularly care for him, or his phony-ass smile. She grabbed a glass of wine from a passing waiter. Sure, say your piece. I admit that you and Anson have an abundance of star power, Jerome acknowledged almost reluctantly. The public loves the two of you together. Eve knew her millions of social media followers were the public, Jerome referred to. Followers who, when Anson had made a few appearances on her channel, had gone bonkers over the thought of the two of them being a couple. She heard a but in Jerome's unexpected compliment. Eve supposed she could help him out and ask what concerned him. Instead, she took another sip of wine. But the majority of those followers don't live in his district. Probably not, Eve conceded. There were many points she could have raised to counter what she sensed was coming next. It would be a wasted effort. From the look in his eyes, Jerome had made up his mind. If you have more to say it. You are a liability to Anson's campaign. You are too young and too frivolous. Her heart might have given a slight kick, but her expression remained placid as she chuckled. Is that right? Let me be blunt. Eve raised an eyebrow. And here I thought that's what you were being. Anson needs to be with a serious woman, not a girl who uses daddy's money to play with makeup online. For a second, she wanted to shoot back and tell him that the money behind her new business was hers. Instead, she waited, suspecting there was more. He needs a Nyla, not an Eve. Eve held onto her temper with both hands. While her older sister was a wonderful woman, an astute businesswoman, and had done an amazing job leading the Grizzlies organization, that didn't mean Eve didn't have her own mad skills. Skills she was using to launch her own business. While many saw her as a party girl, beloved but overindulged by her rich family, and Jerome obviously fit into that category, she was so much more. She'd graduated at the top of her class. Her makeup line was cruelty-free. Her diverse marketing team was composed of smart, savvy women. Yes, she was so much more than her internet persona. Still, she loved Anson and knew how important it was to him to be in a position where he could effect change in the area of mental health services. Could Jerome be right? Was her presence hindering Anson's campaign? She decided to think about that later, when she didn't have Jerome's beady eyes boring into her. Eve offered the man a smile that, like his, didn't reach her eyes. Great talk, but it's time for me to mingle. Without giving him a chance to respond, Eve wiggled her fingers and strode off, the picture of cool confidence. Inside, though, her thoughts whirled and tumbled as her love for Anson squeezed her heart. While she didn't appreciate Jerome's comments, the bottom line was she would do anything to help the man she loved, including, if necessary, taking a big step back from him. Once he returned from the terrace, Anson sought out Eve. When he reached her, Eve kept her worries under tight control, despite her tangled emotions, not wanting to spoil the evening. "How are Tom and Landon?" she asked, relaxing in the warmth of his smile. "Good." He shrugged. "They wanted my thoughts on the expansion of the STAR program." As she kept up with all things Denver, Eve was aware of the Support Team Assisted Response program that the City Council had expanded this year. The program provided additional resources to help people when they were experiencing mental health crises. "What did you tell them?" "That I think having a mental health professional and a paramedic respond to a low-level 911 call is an excellent alternative to sending a police officer." Anson's green eyes shone with excitement. "The program has proven its effectiveness, so expanding it makes good sense." Eve found his enthusiasm contagious. "They should have known you'd be in favor." Eve took a sip of wine and began to relax. She admired Anson's passion and knew it was sincere. "You wouldn't have founded Lighthouse if you weren't interested in improving the treatment of mental health issues." I did point out to them that while my focus through Lighthouse has been more on mental health promotion and prevention, I realize the importance of serving those already suffering with mental health issues. Looping her arm around his, Eve looked up at him, unable to keep the pride from her voice. I'm so proud of you and what you're doing. His hand closed over hers, and he gave it a squeeze. You're going to be making a difference with your company, too. The diverse management team you've assembled and your commitment to hiring women for top positions is only the beginning. When an overwhelming urge to kiss him rose inside her, Eve changed her focus. I've seen Nyla and JR, but I haven't seen Miles yet. Have you? Anson shook his head and scanned the room. No. Is he here? Eve had no doubt Miles would make an appearance tonight. Either that or he'd face their father's wrath. He'll be here. Come late, leave early is his motto for these kinds of events. Not that he doesn't like and admire you, Eve hastily added. I've known Miles as long as I've known you. Anson chuckled. I'm well aware that events like these make him uncomfortable. Anson studied her for a moment. You didn't mention Cameron. I saw him in June when they first arrived. She's every bit as lovely as Cameron says. June Parker. Eve shook her head. It took guts for her to show up tonight, knowing my parents and grandfather would be here. What's with the June Parker thing? That's how my family, with the exception, I guess, of Cameron and my gran, refer to her. As in, once again, Eve lowered her voice. That June Parker who scammed Gran. My grandfather despises her. We better start walking then. Placing his palm against Eve's back, Anson began maneuvering her through the partygoers, scattering smiles like confetti, but not slowing to talk. Why the rush? Eve asked. Because your grandparents are on a collision course with that June Parker. Chapter 3. From his and June's position near the terrace doors, Cameron spotted his grandmother headed their way. He offered her a smile and turned to tell June of her approach when he saw Gran wasn't alone. The expression on Pop's face, the stony facade with glittering eyes, was familiar to Cameron. The man was a barracuda when it came to business and when it came to his family. No one, absolutely no one, messed with a Driscoll. As Velocity's chairman of the board, Johnny might have let his son take over as CEO, but his fingers were still very much in the Velocity pie. When his grandparents were nearly upon them, Cameron slid an arm around June's waist as she confiscated her second glass of wine. The warm smile she bestowed on him as she turned had his heart swelling and his protective instincts shifting to high alert. This is more fun than I imagined it would be, she told him, taking a sip of the Pinot Grigio. Hold that thought, Cameron nearly said, but Hal was already calling out to them. Cameron! June! There you are! Pleasure radiated from Hal's voice, matching the warm smile she bestowed on them both. It's so good to see you! She hugged Cameron first, then shifted to June, holding her at arm's length. It's been too long. Cameron saw June close her eyes tight when Hal hugged her. In that moment, it struck him that his grandmother was likely the closest thing June had to a loving mother figure. While Cameron knew that June loved her mother, he also sensed the two weren't particularly close. Pops? Knowing that June was safe in his grandmother's embrace, Cameron stepped to his grandfather. Good to see you. Johnny stared at Cameron for several long seconds. I can't believe you'd bring that woman into your parents' home, knowing how we feel about her. Cameron didn't shift his gaze from his grandfather's disapproving stare. In Johnny's world, such an action would be seen as weakness or an admission of guilt. Neither of which applied in this situation. You and I both know, Cameron kept his tone firm, that June did nothing wrong. I don't care what my wife... Johnny? Hal's voice rang with an edge of steel. Isn't that Richard Elsner over there? He appears to be trying to get your attention. Elsner made his bed with a mountain of poor decisions. Johnny's voice mirrored the disgust on his weathered face. If he thinks I'm going to lie in it with him, he's mistaken.
It's good to see you again, Mr. Driscoll.
Cameron wasn't sure who was more surprised when June extended her hand to Pops, a pleasant smile lifting her lips. It was a bold move on her part, or maybe she figured she had nothing to lose if he turned and walked away. If he refused to shake her hand, the likely outcome, in Cameron's opinion, she could simply drop her hand. Hal shot her husband a look that would have had any other person falling into line. But Johnny Driscoll cowed to no man or woman. While it was evident that the two loved each other deeply, Cameron had witnessed them at odds numerous times over differences of opinion. Pops. Cameron's voice was a warning growl. June's hand hung in the air for another second before she let it fall to her side, a smile still firmly fixed on her lips. Ignoring them both, Johnny turned to his wife. We should circulate. Anson is counting on us. Hal turned back to June, an apology in her eyes.
I'm glad I got to see you, too.
June stopped the apology before it could fully form, as if she knew hearing it come from Hal's lips on Johnny's behalf would only infuriate him. I'll contact you, and we'll do lunch. If you're free, that is.
I look forward to it.
Reaching out, June grasped Hal's hand and gave it a squeeze. When his grandparents strolled off, Hal's ramrod-stiff spine told Cameron his grandfather was going to hear about his rude behavior once the guests left. Well, June blew out a breath. That went better than anticipated. Cameron nearly choked on his sip of wine. Better than anticipated? Her lips quirked upward. Think about it. No harsh words were exchanged. Though your grandfather obviously still thinks I took advantage of your grandmother, she made it very clear to him and to the rest of the family that the money was her gift to you. Cameron shook his head. Frankly, I don't see why he's so bent out of shape over $20,000. That's pocket change to them.
It's not the dollar amount.
June's expression turned serious.
Your grandfather doesn't like the idea that a person might have taken advantage of the woman he loves. I understand. I wouldn't want anyone taking advantage of you.
Cameron wondered if she'd realized what she'd given away with that statement. Warmth flooded his heart. You know what, Joan? A smile played at the corners of her lips. What, Cameron? I wouldn't want anyone taking advantage of you, either. June wasn't certain how Cameron made it happen, but their paths didn't cross with those of any of his relatives for the rest of the evening. As time passed, she found herself fully relaxing. She stopped at 2 glasses of wine, but indulged in the scrumptious appetizers. Music from the harpist wrapped around her heart. While the melodies weren't always familiar, it felt as if romance was in the air. Or maybe that was simply because she was with Cameron. She'd discovered that being with him made everything brighter, more wonderful. June glanced down at her glass of water and wondered if the bartender had put vodka in it. She couldn't recall ever feeling so sappy. You've surprised me tonight, Joan, Cameron said as they stepped out onto the terrace. Despite the heat lamps, the night had taken on a chill, causing many of the guests who'd been outside to move inside. Her heart flip-flopped as she tightened her hold on the glass. Not trusting herself to speak in that moment, she smiled and inclined her head. I always knew you were beautiful and smart and good at putting others at ease. He lifted the glass from her hand and set it on one of the tall tables, then pulled her into his arms. Gazing down at her, he smiled. What I didn't realize was how strong you are. If you need help moving these tables inside, I'll do my best, but no guarantees. He laughed. Not to mention you have a wonderful sense of humor. Before she could respond, he continued. You took on an immense challenge when you decided to find the person who drove the vehicle that hit and killed your sister. Anyone in my situation, you've never wavered in your determination to find that person and bring them to justice. His hand cupped her cheek, and she leaned into the caress. Losing your sister so traumatically, then having your family fall apart, was huge. But you finished high school, graduated from college, and started building your career. Through it all, you've never lost sight of finding the person who drove that car. Hey, I love compliments as much as the next woman, but I've really done nothing special. Her smile wavered. Plenty of times I've wanted to give up. The police basically gave up. The PI had leads, but no answers. I didn't know what more could be done. That's when Gran stepped in. Yes. June's lips curved in a soft smile. Hal has a way of drawing you into conversation, and before you know it, you've told her everything. I've discovered that myself. Cameron chuckled, then sobered. The thing with Gran is, she really does care. I didn't want to take the money she offered, Cameron. I told her no. But as we talked, I could see it was important to her that I have the opportunity to do everything possible to find my sister's killer. $20,000 really is small change to her. Small change or not, her offering it meant the world to me. June gave him a puzzled look. How did we even get on this topic? I simply mentioned how much you've surprised me with your strength. You've surprised me too, she told him, with your compassion and willingness to consider an issue from all sides. Thank you, June. Hearing you say that means a lot. When I first met you in Paris, I saw this hot guy with a tremendous amount of business savvy and an even larger amount of confidence. What I didn't see, what didn't become evident until I got to know you better, was your kindness and open mind. If you weren't like that, I know we wouldn't be together now. I can't imagine not being with you now. Cameron pulled her close and placed a sweet kiss on her lips. She would have happily lingered in his arms all night, but Cameron's mention of her investigation into her sister's accident reminded her she had work to do. Darren mentioned perhaps inviting us over for dinner this week. If he says something to you about it, whenever works for you will work for me. Good to know. Cameron studied her face. I'll be glad once you get a chance to talk to him and Anson about that night. If they know something that can help, we'll be that much closer to finding the person who killed your sister. They left the party 30 minutes before it was scheduled to end. The crowd had already thinned considerably, and the last thing June wanted was to be left there with no buffer between herself and Cameron's family. Cameron found a parking spot on the street a block from her apartment. While the street was well lit, she wasn't surprised when he got out of the car and fell into step beside her. Her perfect gentleman, she thought with a rush of affection. She expected Cameron to take his leave at the door to the lobby, but he walked inside and entered the elevator to ride with her to the 3rd floor. At the door to her apartment, June turned and wrapped her arms around his neck. I want you to stay. The word simply popped out. A spark flared in his brilliant blue eyes. Are you sure? She smiled. She didn't trust easily, but she trusted Cameron Driscoll, with her heart and, tonight, with her body. Positive. Before she could pull out her key, his mouth closed over hers, and she let herself drown in feeling and heat. When they finally came up for air, she gave a shaky laugh. We better get inside before these clothes start coming off and the neighbors call the cops. I like that thought. You like the idea of the neighbors calling the police? He laughed and gave her hair a tug. I was referring to the clothes coming off. Inside, with the door locked and bolted behind them, they made short work of that part of the evening. I have condoms.
she told him, her voice sounding breathless as he planted kisses down her neck. "I hoped we'd get to this point."
"I have some with me, too."
His hand slid up her sides, his thumbs stopping just below her breasts. Heat burned where his palms rested, and desire, hot and sweet, surged.
"You're not the only one who's been hoping for this."
Now that they had the housekeeping details out of the way, June gave in to the desire, into the love that she felt for this wonderful man. As he scooped her up in his arms and carried her to the bed, dropping down beside her, the rightness of the moment washed over her. She loved Cameron Driscoll, and tonight she would show him just how much. Chapter 4. Later the next morning, June found herself sitting on the sofa in her mother's living room. When her mom had called and asked her to come over, she and Cameron had just finished breakfast. Her mother's call had put an end to the prospect of leisurely lovemaking that morning, but June had discovered that Hot and Quick had much to recommend it. "I hope I didn't interrupt anything." Camille Dion Parker was a pretty woman with the same dark hair and hazel eyes she'd passed on to her youngest daughter. Aubrey had favored her father's side of the family with her curly blonde hair and blue eyes. The past 10 years, beginning with the death of her oldest child and followed by a divorce, had taken a toll on Camille. The light that had once sparkled in her eyes hadn't been seen in years, and lines now edged her eyes and mouth. Before Aubrey's death, Camille had loved shopping for clothes and keeping up with the latest fashions. The woman sitting across from June, wearing a faded dress that had seen the inside of a washing machine far too many times, was someone June barely recognized. "I was just eating breakfast when you called. I went to a party last night and got home late, so I slept in," June told her mom, sticking close to the truth.
"A party?"
A wistful look crossed her mother's face.
"If Aubrey were alive, she'd be attending parties? Or maybe she'd already be married with a couple of children."
This was how it was most days with her mother. Somehow every comment got turned back to Aubrey. Most of the time, June understood, but just once, she'd like her mom to pay attention to what was going on in her life. "It was a fundraiser for Anson Hawkins." June kept her tone light. "He's running for a seat on the city council."
"I've never been interested in politics."
Her mother waved a dismissive hand.
"In my experience, all politicians are the same."
Okay, time to move on. "How's the new routine going?" Her mother's dark brows pulled together, as if June had spoken in a foreign language. "Last time I was here, you and I worked out a schedule." June had read that a person with depression could feel more in control if they had a regular routine to follow. It had taken a good part of an afternoon to come up with a schedule for meals, medication, physical activity, and sleep. June had even helped her mom organize when she would do household chores. Her mother made a face.
"I've never liked schedules."
"You said you'd give it a try," June reminded her, trying to keep any irritation from her voice.
"I changed my mind."
Her mother leaned forward.
"Before you ask, I also canceled my upcoming appointment with Dr. Elbers."
Her mom had been seeing the psychiatrist for the past year. "Why did you cancel?"
"I didn't feel like going."
"I'm concerned." June chose her words carefully. "That your depression may be getting worse. You like Dr. Elbers. You told me you believe he's helped you."
"I'm not worse,"
her mom snapped, then expelled a breath.
"This is a difficult time for me, June. 10 years since your sister left this earth in such a horrific manner, and we're no closer to finding who did it."
"I'm still working on that," June assured her.
"And getting nowhere?"
The words felt like a slap. June took a breath and let it out. "I'm doing the best I can." A knock at the screen door stopped June from saying more. A smile, an actual smile, lit Camille's face.
"Up for a visitor?"
Detective Gary Willis asked. "Please, come in." Gary tried the knob.
"I would, but the door is locked."
"June," Camille ordered, "get up and unlock the door. Hurry! We don't want to keep Gary waiting." June wasn't sure why seeing the police detective and former neighbor made her mother so happy. She was just glad to see a genuine smile on Camille's face. Quickly unlocking the screen door, June stepped aside to let the detective inside. It was then she saw the baking pan he held in his hands.
"Lynn and I and the kids are next door at my mom's. She asked if I'd return this to you."
Gary placed the pan on a side table.
"She wanted me to tell you thanks for letting her use it."
"It was my pleasure." Camille motioned to the sofa, where June had sat only moments earlier. "Please sit for a spell. Can June get you something to drink?"
"I'm fine."
Gary took a seat on the sofa. June resumed her seat on the other end. "You and Lynn are visiting your mom?"
"Us and the kids. My dad got an award in church this morning, and the whole family turned out. Aunts, uncles, cousins, as well as my brothers and sisters."
Gary shook his head.
"Chaos on steroids."
"You've been blessed with a lovely family," Camille told him, her tone wistful.
"I have, and I don't take a minute of it for granted."
The sound of an engine revving had Gary frowning.
"I told Dennis he could take the Chevy for a short drive, not beat it."
Camille inclined her head. "Dennis is the cousin who is your age, right? The car-crazy one?" June watched the interaction with interest, content to be the silent observer. Seeing her mom interested in and interacting with another person stilled some of her worries.
"He's actually a couple years older than me. Though, because of when his birthday is and being held back in 3rd grade, he was in the same class as Aubrey and me."
"When he'd come over to see you back then, he would have his car radio turned up so loud I could hear it inside the house." Camille's eyes turned dark, as if she was looking back. "Aubrey accused me of being an old fuddy-duddy when I complained."
"I can't imagine Aubrey saying anything like that to you."
Gary smiled.
"You and she were always so close."
As if realizing they'd both been ignoring June, Gary shifted to face her. In his jeans and t-shirt, Gary looked more like the boy she remembered while growing up next door to his family than a police detective and father of 2.
"How are things with you, June?"
"Good." June thought of Cameron, and her lips curved. "I'm enjoying being back in Denver. June went to a party last night." Camille waved an airy hand. "A political thing." Gary inclined his head.
"I didn't realize you were interested in politics."
"I'm interested in Denver's future." Not wanting to leave it at that, June went on to explain. It was a fundraiser for Anson Hawkins. Gary's gaze sharpened. He knew she'd yet to cross Anson off the list of party guests she wanted to talk to about the night of Aubrey's death.
"How was it?"
"I met lots of new people there." Conscious of her mother only a couple of feet away, and not wanting to get into a discussion of the accident, June kept her tone offhand. "I met both Anson and Darren Flock." The merest flicker of Gary's eyelashes told June he recognized Darren as another name on the list.
"Sounds like a party of Denver's elite. Where was it?"
"At Ross and Margene Driscoll's home." Gary let out a low whistle.
"Is the inside every bit as impressive as the outside?"
"Every bit." Gary's phone dinged, and he glanced down.
"Oops, sounds like I'm wanted next door."
He pushed to his feet and smiled at Camille.
"It was so nice seeing you again, Mrs. Parker."
"You come over any time." Camille rose. "I still believe you and my Aubrey were meant to be together."
"Aubrey was a wonderful girl."
Gary turned toward June.
"Just like this one."
Monday, on his way to meet Eve at Spill the Beans, a family-owned coffee shop wedged in between a dry cleaner and an antique store, Anson swung by his campaign headquarters to talk to Jerome. The fact that Eve had canceled their tentative plans for yesterday troubled him. Since she'd returned to Denver after graduation, they'd been building on a relationship that had begun to blossom last year when he'd been in San Francisco and had made a side trip to Berkeley. They'd met for dinner and had talked for hours. Listening to her discuss her business plan and the strides she'd made on her social media platforms had blown him away. It was over that dinner of pad thai and green papaya salad that Anson had realized he no longer saw Eve as Cameron's younger sister, but as an intelligent, interesting woman in her own right. As they'd continued to FaceTime and meet in person whenever he was in San Francisco or she was back in Denver, his feelings for her had only grown. Anson had come to truly know her, to see the woman behind the sophisticated facade she presented to the world. If she'd canceled their plans yesterday because she'd had work to do, that was cool, but he wasn't sure that had been the reason. On Saturday, as the evening had drawn to a close, he'd sensed something was off with her. Which was why, despite a packed day, he'd dropped everything when she'd asked if he could meet her for coffee at 11. He hoped she was ready to tell him what was bothering her so they could deal with it together. He and his campaign manager had been playing phone tag all morning. Jerome insisted talking was more secure than texting because phones could be hacked and texts leaked. Maybe Cameron was right, Anson thought. Maybe Jerome was paranoid. Tired of trying to catch him on the phone, Anson had decided to swing by for a quick conversation. "I'll get back to you on that." Jerome clicked off the call, pushed back from his desk, and stood. "I didn't realize you were stopping by. I'm on my way to meet Eve, and your messages made it sound urgent that we speak." Anson waved away Jerome's gesture for him to sit. "What's up?" Jerome's smile faded, and his gaze turned watchful. "She told you what I said?" "Who? Eve?" Everything in Anson went cold. "What did you say to her, Jerome?" Jerome hesitated for only a second, which was long enough for Anson to know that whatever it had been, he wasn't going to like it. "We simply had a frank talk." Jerome waved a dismissive hand. "Long overdue." "About?" "About you and her. About your political future." With great effort, Anson kept his tone easy. "Go on." "I told her that while the two of you have an abundance of star power, I'm not sure she's an asset to your campaign. I think we can agree that she's, well, too young and frivolous." Jerome continued, apparently not noticing Anson's tightened jaw. "It would be one thing if you were with Nyla, the respectable daughter of a prominent family. But Eve is a child. She's a sweet kid, but she's all about lipstick and selfies. You need to be with a serious woman, Anson, not just another pretty socialite." Anson counted to 10. He had to count a second time before he felt back in control. "You don't have a clue what you're talking about. Frivolous?" Anson's chuckle held an edge that Jerome would have had to be hearing impaired not to hear. Eve wrote up a business plan for her cosmetics company while she was still in college. Her father was against her going out on her own until he saw her plan. Let me tell you, impressing Ross Driscoll isn't easy. I know most people think her father is funding this venture, but she's using her own money and has a plan for taking it public in 5 years. Most people don't know that and will only see if they don't see that Eve is serious and online savvy and an excellent marketer. That's their problem, not mine. Certainly not yours. Anson gave Jerome a hard stare. "You handle my campaign, not my personal life. You try to get between me and Eve again, and you'll be gone." When his campaign manager said nothing, Anson pinned him with an even fiercer look. "Do we understand each other?" A muscle in Jerome's jaw jumped as he nodded. Anson forced himself to steady. "Now, tell me what you needed to speak with me about." Eve took her latte to a table in a corner of Spill the Beans to wait for Anson. Though she loved any excuse to dress up, the establishment was low-key, and she hadn't wanted to draw any unwanted attention. Instead of putting together the kind of stylized outfit her followers loved, she'd gone simple: pencil pants in a champagne color and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. White sneakers added to the casual vibe. While she sipped her drink, her mind drifted to Anson. Though Eve viewed Anson as more of an activist than a politician, she knew he believed that being elected to the city council would allow him to effect even more change. He had so many ideas on how the city could better serve all of its citizens, and he was the kind of man to make things happen. His passion and his integrity, along with a strong sense of purpose, would make him a stellar council member. The last thing Eve wanted was to torpedo his political chances. On Saturday night, she'd considered taking a big step back from him, but by Sunday night, she had decided not to do anything until she'd spoken with him. She'd asked Anson if he was free to meet her at 11. The time fit in nicely between the live stream she'd done that morning and the afternoon meeting scheduled with her media team. Another Zoom call later in the afternoon with the manufacturers would round out the day. Apparently, the time had worked for him, too. The bells over the door jingled. She looked up and saw he'd gone for casual, too, ditching the tie and settling for dark pants and a cotton shirt open at the collar. Lifting a hand in greeting, she smiled. His eyes lit up when he saw her, and he grinned, already crossing the room to where she sat. When he reached her table, he gestured to the empty chair. "Is this seat taken?" "I believe it's got your name on it." Rubbing his chin, he surveyed the weathered chair. His green eyes twinkled. "I believe you're right." His lips curved again into that easy smile that never failed to make her heart beat faster as he dropped into the chair next to hers. It took everything Eve possessed not to lean over and kiss him. They'd kissed a few times, casual kinds of kisses, but those were no longer enough for her. As the subtle, intoxicating scent of his cologne wrapped around her senses, she accepted she wanted more from Anson Hawkins. He glanced at the counter. "Can I get you something to drink?" She pointed to her cup. "Thanks, but I already grabbed a latte. I'd have picked you up something, but I wasn't sure what you'd be in the mood for this morning." "I'm in the mood to see you." Anson shot her a wink. "I worried I'd be late. I stopped by campaign headquarters to speak with Jerome." Eve's heart flip-flopped, but her hand was steady as she picked up her cup. "Any special reason?" "Jerome said we needed to talk, that it was urgent. Business-wise, he wanted me to approve some press releases that he could have easily attached to an email." Anson met her gaze, his green eyes serious. "What we ended up talking about was you." Though everything in Eve went cold, she waved an airy hand. "Let me guess. He gave you the same speech he gave me at the party Saturday." "Jerome was hired to manage my political campaign, not my personal life. Our relationship is none of his business." Concern filled Anson's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me Saturday what he said to you?" "I needed time to mull it over." Setting down her cup, Eve kept her tone casual. "Most of what he said was rubbish, but I am concerned. I certainly don't want your association with me to negatively impact your campaign." "That won't happen. Jerome was so far off base he wasn't even on the ball field." Reaching over, Anson took her hand, twining his fingers with hers. "I not only want you by my side, Eve, I need you. You're real and authentic, and someone I can always rely on." "That's sweet of you to say." Emotion had her voice turning husky. "It's the truth." Anson shifted his gaze out the window for a second before returning it to her. "Politics can feel so false, with everyone wanting me to be a certain way. You ground me." Her heart became a sweet mass in her chest. "I think we do a good job of grounding each other." Anson brought their joined hands to his mouth and brushed a kiss across her knuckles. "I couldn't agree more." Chapter 5. "Their house isn't as far out of town as I imagined." June told Cameron when he pulled the BMW into the driveway of a sprawling ranch home in a wooded area southwest of Denver. When Darren had mentioned having her and Cameron over for dinner, June had felt hopeful, but hadn't wanted to get too excited. It could easily have been just one of those things a person said when they wanted to put someone off. On Tuesday, Cameron had called and asked if she was open to dinner Thursday night with his sister and brother-in-law. He had made it clear it would be pizza and beer, nothing fancy. Both Nyla and Darren had crazy work schedules, but they did know how to pick up the phone and order pizza.
It isn't far, but it feels away from the action,
Cameron said, shutting off the ignition. He rounded the front of the car to follow her up the walkway. When her hands began to tremble, June clasped them together and told herself to think of this as a business meeting with an important client she needed to win over with her sincerity.
It'll be fine.
As if sensing her unease, Cameron gave her arm a squeeze.
This is important to you. It's also important to me, because I want to help you find closure.
Cameron offered a reassuring smile.
Just remember, I'll be right there beside you. If he balks at answering questions regarding that night, I'll help you stress the importance.
The front door swung open just as they reached the porch.
I told Nyla I thought I heard a car drive up.
Darren's gaze fell on June.
Welcome to our humble abode.
Compared to his in-laws' house, the home was humble indeed. But this ranch possessed a charm and warmth that wrapped itself around June the second she stepped inside. A living room anchored by a massive fireplace and decorated by someone with an eye for comfort had some of the tenseness leaving June's shoulders. Until Nyla stepped out of the kitchen.
Welcome.
Nyla's smile came close, but didn't quite reach her eyes.
I hope Darren told you we're keeping it simple tonight.
Nyla directed the comment to her brother.
Pizza and beer on the back patio.
June stepped forward. Is there anything I can do to help?
Everything is ready.
Nyla smiled.
We were just waiting for you.
If June hadn't looked at the time right when they'd driven up, she might have worried they were late, but she knew they'd arrived 10 minutes early.
Well, we're here.
Cameron slung an arm around June's shoulders.
Let's eat. We ordered 2 different kinds of pizza.
Darren slanted a glance at June.
In case you're a vegetarian, one has black and green olives, and the other is a meat lover's.
I'm not, June told him. Both sound wonderful.
Can I get you something to drink?
Nyla asked, still playing the part of the perfect hostess.
We have wine, Mountain High beer, and an assortment of sodas.
June knew Mountain High was produced by Anson's family brewery.
Is the wine white?
Cameron gave her a poke in the ribs.
June only drinks white.
Really? Nyla's brows knit together.
You don't like any of the reds?
June chuckled. I have this habit of spilling anything red on myself. Whatever wine you have is fine with me.
The pizza sauce will likely get you anyway.
Cameron deadpanned. This time, June laughed out loud.
Probably.
Out of the corner of her eye, June caught Nyla studying her and Cameron as if she was surprised by their ease with each other. While Darren told Cameron about an upcoming football party he and Nyla planned to host in the skybox at the start of the Grizzlies season, Nyla focused on June.
You and my brother appear close.
For the briefest of moments, June considered denying it, but stopped herself. Cameron is a wonderful, caring man. Nyla's gaze never left June's face.
He's also a wealthy one.
I don't care about his money. June felt her temper spike. I care about him.
That's what I like to hear. Cameron grinned. This is a private discussion.
Nyla slanted her brother a glinting glance.
Not when it's about me, it isn't.
Cameron tightened his hold around June's shoulders and gave a squeeze.
June and I are together, Nye. That's how it is.
You know how Pops and Dad feel about... She began.
You don't want to go there.
Cameron's tone might be light, but there was a warning in his eyes.
I can't believe you'd want to go there. I remember how opposed both of them were to you and Darren. Look how that turned out."
Nyla's gaze drifted to where her husband stood. A soft look filled her eyes.
"Face it, Nye, if they can accept a flock—"
Darren strolled up and flashed a smile.
"Getting them to accept June will be a walk in the park."
The tension dissipated as talk over pizza turned once again to football and the Grizzlies' chances this year of reaching the Super Bowl. When Miles showed up, Nyla explained that she'd invited him to join them. From his passionate discussion about several player trades, Cameron realized his brother was as into football as his sister. Cameron took a sip of his Coke.
"I find myself wondering why you've never worked for the Grizzlies, Miles."
Miles, wearing his standard attire of jeans, t-shirt, and boots, relaxed back in his lawn chair.
"I like what I do too much."
"What is it you do?" June asked, her eyes bright with interest.
"I run the hotel and the bar in Silver Creek."
Miles smiled, then clarified.
"The town, not the building."
"You don't miss life in Denver?" June asked.
"I'm sure Cameron has told you."
Miles gestured with a hand holding a bottle of Mountain High.
"That we grew up in Silver Creek. Other than Eve, who was pretty young when we moved to Denver, Silver Creek was home to us. For me, it still is."
"I love life in the city," June admitted.
Miles nodded. "There is a lot to do."
"Like the party Saturday night." Nyla settled her gaze on her younger brother.
"You were missed?"
Miles took a pull from the bottle of beer and gave a laugh.
"Can't imagine by who."
"Trini was there." Nyla might have tossed the words out casually, but Cameron saw they'd hit the target when Miles straightened in his chair.
"How could she afford the ticket?"
Miles asked.
"Nyla and I paid for it,"
Darren explained. "She's my intern, and she'll be helping Anson on his campaign." Nyla's tone remained easy. "Being at the party was a good experience for her."
"It would have been a better one for her if she'd seen you."
Darren grinned. Miles shrugged.
"Sorry I missed her. It would have been good to catch up."
"The party was a success, even without you," Cameron told his brother. "The silent auction items brought in a considerable amount. When you add in the money paid to attend, it gave Anson a jump in fundraising." Miles took another pull of his beer.
"He'll be a good addition to the council."
Beside him, Cameron sensed June was trying to figure out the best time to ask Darren her questions. The way Cameron saw it, there was no better time than now. If she waited too much longer, the opportunity would pass.
"June has a couple questions she'd like to ask Darren."
Cameron turned and smiled at June before refocusing on his brother-in-law.
"Is now a good time?"
"Sure," Darren said.
What kinds of questions?"
Nyla interrupted. "For what purpose?"
"It's okay, Nyla."
Darren covered her hand with his and gave it a squeeze.
"I've nothing to hide."
"I'd still like June to answer my question before she interrogates you." A muscle in Cameron's jaw jumped.
"I can assure you—"
This time it was June who jumped into the conversation. "I understand where Nyla is coming from, and I don't mind explaining." The smile she offered Cameron held reassurance. "My questions concern a party that was held at the home of Sly Allen 10 years ago." Nyla opened her mouth, but June continued without taking a breath. "My sister Aubrey was 18 at the time. She'd graduated from high school in May and had started taking college classes that summer." June took a breath and let it out slowly. "My sister was about as far from a party girl as one could get. She was quiet and studious. On a Saturday night, you'd more likely find her in the library than at a party."
"But not that Saturday night,"
Miles said softly, compassion filling his hazel eyes. "No," she agreed. "Not that Saturday night." "You know this Sly?" Nyla asked Darren. Darren shrugged.
"Back then, everyone knew Sly and his parties."
Nyla turned to June. "I take it your sister went to his party?" She went with a friend who ended up hooking up with a guy she met there. From everything I've learned, Aubrey left the party alone. Quiet filled the table. That night, my sister, June paused and visibly fought for control, was struck by a car and killed on West Morrison Road. The police found her car parked on the side of the road. When her voice trembled, Cameron reached over and took her hand. She grasped it like a lifeline, offering a weak smile. It feels as if I've told this story 1,000 times. Sometimes I get through it without so much emotion, like it's a report. Other times, it's more difficult.
Was her car hit?
Darren asked. No. She had a flat tire. Cell reception in that area tends to be spotty. The police determined she was on the side of the road, likely trying to flag down someone for help. They believe whoever hit her stopped, but... June shut her eyes for a moment and took a breath before continuing. She was killed instantly. A man called 911 from her cell phone. The police told me that even though she had no service out there through her own carrier, the 911 call connected via a rival carrier's network. At any rate, there weren't any prints on the phone, and whoever called 911 wasn't there when rescue vehicles arrived.
I'm sorry, June. I can't imagine something like that happening to anyone I love.
Sympathy filled Darren's eyes.
I'd like to help you, but I'm not sure what information you want from me. The main traffic on the road that night came from those attending Sly's party. That isn't to say it couldn't have been some random guy driving in that area.
Cameron cast a glance at June.
Whoever hit and killed June's sister has not been caught. The police have stopped investigating, lacking the resources to continue without new evidence. Last year, with the 10th anniversary of Aubrey's death approaching, June's mother began to spiral.
Cameron paused, unsure how much to say. June stepped back into the conversation. My mother battles depression. The 10th anniversary of that horrible night has been especially hard on her. I've been speaking with those who might have been in the area around the time Aubrey was hit, with the goal of discovering who the hit-and-run driver was. Right now, all I've learned is what I've told you. I'm sorry for your loss, June. Nyla's voice took on an unaccustomed softness. I can't imagine losing a sibling in that manner and having no answers.
I told June that when I drove by the accident that night, the rescue vehicles were already there,
Cameron added. And Cameron didn't recall seeing Aubrey at the party. June unsuccessfully tried to hide her disappointment.
Did Aubrey look like you?
Darren asked. No. June pulled a photograph up on her phone and handed the phone to Darren. This is, was Aubrey. Miles, Nyla, and Darren leaned close to study the picture.
She looks like a nice person,
Miles commented first.
I wasn't there that night, so I can't help you. I wish I could.
Nyla looked up from the picture. She was a pretty girl, she said softly.
She looks like June a little around the eyes,
Darren said, returning his gaze to the photo to study it intently.
Sly loved girls with long blonde hair, so she'd have fit right in at the party.
Darren glanced at June.
I don't recall seeing her.
Please, think hard, June pressed. I realize it was a long time ago. I don't think she would have been dancing or in the center of the action. Can you remember anyone sitting alone? Someone who looked like she didn't belong? Darren shook his head.
I'm sorry. To be honest, I was more likely to be in the center of the action back then. I didn't necessarily reach out to the shy kids, if you know what I mean.
June nodded. Of course, I understand. What about when you left the party? Did you drive past the accident like Cameron did?
I didn't. My house was in the opposite direction.
June's shoulders slumped. Right. Well, thank you again for answering.
Who else is on your list?
Darren asked.
I was a regular at Sly's parties.
June lifted her phone, scrolled to the list, then handed her phone to Darren again. Any chance you remember any friend who talked about getting their car fixed in the days after? The police looked into local body shops, but that was another dead end. Darren frowned as he studied the names.
No memories of anyone with car problems. The only person I know on this list is Anson. The other names aren't at all familiar, which isn't all that surprising, since some came to one party and never came back.
I bet my sister would have been one of those. June spoke almost to herself. She probably wanted to see what a college party was like. Knowing how she was, I don't think she'd have gone back. Lifting the phone from Darren's fingers, June dropped it into her bag, then glanced at Cameron. He got the message. It was time to head home. You spoke with Gran about this? Nyla asked June before Cameron could rise. I did. A tiny smile lifted June's lips. She has a way of getting things out of you that you have no intention of revealing. She seemed to empathize with my mother's pain. The $20,000 was to help you find the driver who hit your sister and left her there. Nyla's expression gave nothing away. Yes. June expelled a breath. A PI is expensive. I'd hit so many dead ends that I was beginning to lose hope.
What's that old saying about it being darkest before the dawn?
Miles surprised them all with the comment. Then he leaned forward and met June's gaze.
Don't give up until you've overturned every rock. If you still don't have answers, then move on, knowing you've done all you can do.
That's the plan. June rose. Thanks for a lovely evening.
You haven't spoken with Anson yet?
Darren arched a brow. Not yet. Perhaps he'll have some answers that will help, Nyla offered. Perhaps. June's lips quirked in a humorless smile. I'm past ready for some good news. Chapter 6. Eve pulled on the motorcycle helmet and climbed onto the back of Anson's vintage Indian cycle. She'd just finished doing an Instagram live broadcast when she'd received his text asking if she was free this afternoon. Luckily, she was. Now they were headed to God knew where. She didn't care. All that mattered was spending the afternoon alone with Anson. He'd told her to bring her swimming suit, so she guessed wherever they were headed involved water. Since he appeared excited about surprising her, she didn't ask many questions. With her arms tightly wrapped around his waist, she relaxed against his back and enjoyed the ride. She found herself disappointed when he pulled into a winding driveway that led to a cabin. An impressive summer home on a lake. When he stopped the cycle in front of the house, Eve hopped off. Is this your place? She asked.
Belongs to the family, he told her. It's isolated, which is a big plus. I thought we could grab something for lunch from the refrigerator, take out the pontoon, and enjoy the water and sun, along with the food.
And each other? Eve flashed a cheeky smile.
Goes without saying.
His eyes met hers.
Do my plans meet with your approval?
They do. She kept her gaze locked on his as desire shimmered in the air. Eve's heart began to race. She and Anson had become close over the past years. They'd teased and joked, but had kept it casual. It was that easy camaraderie between them that had her followers thinking he was her boyfriend, while they were still only friends. Her feelings for him had only grown stronger now that she was back in Denver. She'd done her share of dating, but not one of those smart, accomplished guys had ever come close to capturing her heart. Until Anson.
Eve.
He trailed the backs of his fingers down her cheek, his voice a soft caress. She looked up and met dancing green eyes.
Are you ready to get this party started?
Anson whistled as he changed into swim trunks and a t-shirt in one bedroom, while Eve changed into her suit in another. Not because he didn't want to get naked with her. He wanted that in the worst way. But he wouldn't rush what was building between them. She mattered too much to risk a misstep, which meant he needed her to be sure of her feelings for him before they jumped into bed. Anson headed to the kitchen. Opening the refrigerator, he took out the food he'd stocked last night, items he knew she liked: hummus, carrot sticks, and grapes. "Hey, you." He turned, and there she was, looking more lovely than any woman had a right to look, in a red bikini and a filmy wrap skirt tied around her waist. Flip-flops showed off toenails painted the same vibrant red. Her hair, shiny and sleek, glimmered in the light of the kitchen. Cocking his head, Anson narrowed his gaze. "Does your hair have sparkles in it?" She laughed with delight. "Everything about me sparkles." "You're right about that." Snaking an arm around her waist, he pulled her to him and studied her hair while reveling in the feel of her warm skin against his arm. "Yep, I see sparkles." "I see an insulated lunch bag." Making no effort to move out of his embrace, she pointed. "What's in there?" "All of your favorites," he told her. "Triscuits, hummus, grapes, carrots." "Avocado, cilantro, and lime Triscuits?" "Is there any other kind?" A pleased look crossed her face, replaced a second later by suspicion. "Really? Are you serious? Those are really difficult to find." "Yes, and yes, they are nearly impossible to find. But I managed to track down a box." Anson could have gone for the joke and made a flippant comment. He went for serious instead. "I know how busy you've been getting ready for the launch. I appreciate you taking time to simply be with me." Her hand rose to cup his face. "I love being with you. You know that." Turning, he wrapped his arms around her and pulled her close. "I feel the same." Eve rested her head against his chest, and Anson stroked her silky hair. He didn't know what he'd done to deserve such a wonderful woman, one who truly cared about him, one who wasn't out for his money, she had plenty of her own, or filled with a desire to be part of Denver's elite. She was already a part of that crowd. "I don't care what Jerome thinks," she said. "I'm with you because I want to be with you, not because I want to please my fans." When she lifted her head, Anson met her gaze. "It's important you know what you mean to me, not just as a casual friend either. What I feel for you is, well, I love you, Eve." Before he could say more, she stepped close and cupped his face in her hands, her eyes intense and very blue. "I love you too." Her words were as soft as a caress. "And unless you've got your heart set on spending the afternoon on the water, I've got another idea that I think you'll like even better." "Come with me." Eve crooked her finger, and Anson followed her down the hallway into one of the bedrooms. As his gaze traveled slowly over her, Eve shivered. He suddenly grinned. "I think I'm going to like this alternative plan. A lot." A hot riff of sensation traveled up Eve's spine at the desire in his eyes. "I thought you might." Her voice sounded breathless to her own ears. A sudden look of tenderness crossed his face. Even before his lips met hers, she knew the feel of them, the softness, the warmth, the gentleness. Eve wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him even closer. She loved the way he smelled, a woodsy mixture of cologne and soap and maleness that brought a tingle to her lips and started heat percolating low in her belly. "I didn't want to rush you," he said in a husky voice that made her blood feel like warm honey sliding through her veins. "You're not rushing me?" Eve realized she was stroking the back of his neck, twining her fingers in his thick, soft hair. She planted a kiss at his throat, his skin salty beneath her lips. "I've been wanting this." Pulling his face down with her free hand, she gave him a ferocious kiss. They were both breathing hard when he pulled back, his eyes an impossible shade of green. "I've got condoms," he assured her. "I'm on the pill. She met his gaze. We're doubly protected.
Then what are we waiting for?
Heat radiated from him as he kissed her again, this time with a slow thoroughness that left her weak and trembling. As clothing fell to the floor, Eve noticed her hands weren't the only ones that shook. She studied the strong lines of his face before her gaze dropped lower. Eve found herself longing to run her hands over his body, to feel the coiled strength of skin and muscle sliding under her fingers. Anson's lips lifted in a boyish smile as he stepped close to tuck a stray dark curl behind her ear.
You know, you can touch as well as look.
Eve chuckled. You've been checking me out too, buddy. Don't pretend otherwise.
I have, and you're gorgeous.
Inside. He pulled her to him, his hand flattened against her lower back, drawing her up against the length of his body.
And out.
A smoldering heat flared through her, a sensation she didn't bother to fight. She cocked her head. Why are we still talking? He laughed, then his mouth turned voracious on hers. Matching him beat for crazed beat, Eve gave herself up to the need erupting in her, and to the love flowing hot through her veins. The Party in the Park fundraiser, held on Saturday, was promoted as a free, family-focused, fun affair. Eve had encouraged Anson to have an event that really represented him. While they both agreed that the high-end cocktail party had been a necessary evil, the two of them had enough personal money to foot the bill for something community-oriented. They'd rounded up people from different community organizations to participate in the fundraiser by providing information on local community college programs, mental health services, senior and child care organizations, and food bank services. Lighthouse was represented. Not only were employees giving out gratitude jars and coupons for an introductory yoga class, Anson had paid a dozen massage therapists to give shoulder massages that afternoon. Food trucks were out in force, offering free samples of everything from Mexican hamburgers and pineapple upside-down pancakes to cups of creamy white mac and cheese. To everyone's delight, several ice cream trucks were there, keeping everyone cool. Anson, who'd been mingling all afternoon, stood beside Eve, who'd taken a break from her volunteer duties in the Lighthouse booth. I should get back. Eve brushed a kiss over his cheek. Those gratitude jars have been a big hit. I'm glad you ordered as many as you did.
Thanks to your suggestion.
He ran a hand down her hair. When she was close, it was hard for him to keep from touching her. Always happy to help. Eve shot a smile at June and Cameron, who stood on Anson's other side. I'll see you guys later. Anson watched until she disappeared from sight, then turned to his friends.
I suppose I should do some more mingling. A candidate's work is never done,
Cameron said in a joking tone. Like Anson, he'd gone for casual, in chino shorts and a polo.
I'm learning a lot.
Anson's expression turned serious.
There are so many in this community who are hurting, or who have needs they don't feel are being met.
Before you head off, June began, I wonder if I could ask you a few questions. When he opened his mouth to respond, she rushed to add, I know that this isn't the best time, but I also know you've been super busy and...
Cameron told me you have some questions concerning a party at Sly's house 10 years ago.
Anson met her gaze with a steady one of his own.
I'll be happy to share what I remember, but it was a long time ago.
Do you want to sit? June offered, looking around for a table.
We could... Why don't you just ask? If we sit, we'll be interrupted.
Anson chuckled.
Heck, we'll probably be interrupted anyway.
If we are, that's okay, June told him. We'll find another time. I'll do my best to make this quick. June started at the beginning, telling him what her sister had been like and about her going to the party with a friend, then leaving alone.
Do they know why she pulled over on that stretch of road?
Anson asked. Her car had a flat tire. June raked a hand through her hair. The police think she was probably trying to flag down someone to help when she was hit. Seeing the pain in her eyes, Anson wished he could help her. He searched for how to tell her that he didn't recall much of that particular night, without going into detail. That summer had been a stressful time in his life. His parents had been monitoring his curfew like prison guards. His girlfriend of the past 6 months had turned distant, and the anxiety that he'd kept under control with sports during the school year had flared. Anson wasn't proud of how he'd fought to keep his parents in the dark about his struggles. It hadn't been until college, when his life had been falling apart, that he'd learned his father suffered from anxiety too. They'd been understanding and supportive and had put him in touch with a counselor who'd given him some good coping strategies for his anxiety. That time in his life had fostered his belief in the value of mental health promotion and services. He blinked and realized that June had stopped talking and was gazing expectantly at him. Glancing down, he realized she'd shoved her camera at him. A picture of a young girl with curly blonde hair and a shy smile stared up at him. After studying the picture, he shook his head. "I'm sorry, I don't remember her." Disappointment stole across June's face as she took back the phone and slid it into the tiny bag hanging by a chain over her shoulder. Nobody remembers Aubrey. I suppose it's not surprising. She wasn't one to stand out. June expelled a breath. How about on your way home after the party? Did you see anything? As in? He asked cautiously. Anything at all. June's gaze never left his face. Any little detail would be helpful. Anson pulled his brows together and shook his head. Did you see the accident site? Without warning, an image of a white car sitting alone by the side of the road flashed through his mind. Just as quickly, the vision disappeared. Anson cleared his throat. I don't remember seeing an accident site. So you didn't see any rescue vehicles when you drove by? Cameron turned to Anson. You left the party before me. I did? Anson shrugged. I don't recall. That was the night you and Tiffany got into that big argument, when you caught her kissing that guy from Boulder. You left right afterward, Cameron reminded him. That particular night suddenly came into sharp focus. After seeing Tiffany and the guy, all he'd wanted was to get out of there and make it home before his parents. The night had sucked enough without him ending up being grounded for going out when they'd told him to stay home. Seeing all eyes were now on him, Anson joked. How do you remember that, Cam? It was 10 years ago. How do you not? Cameron shot back, confusion shimmering in his blue eyes. You usually have a better memory than I do. There were just so many parties that summer. They all blur together. Anson turned to June. You said she had a flat. He rubbed his chin. What did her car look like? It was a white Buick sedan? Anson managed to maintain his composure during the rest of the event. When June had mentioned the white sedan, his heart rate had begun a full-out sprint. He remembered the car sitting at the side of the road. If the rescue vehicles had arrived shortly after he'd driven past, then what? Anson thought. Then what? Aubrey must have been there, waiting for help, injured or already dead, when he'd driven by. Try as he might, he couldn't recall seeing a person near that car, either inside it or standing by it. Then again, it had been foggy that night, and he'd been in a hurry to get home to avoid getting in trouble with his dad. Anson's entire body jittered at the thought that if he'd stopped to check on that car, he could have made a difference in what happened. He'd always considered himself to be someone others could count on, someone who did the right thing. Maybe he wasn't the kind of man he'd thought he was. Maybe he was just as phony as others he knew who professed to be humanitarians, but really didn't care about anything but themselves. The thought that he wasn't authentic deep down, that he was simply playing at being caring, tore at him. He had to find somewhere where he could be alone to think. The panicky feeling wasn't new, nor was the racing stream of thoughts that only fueled his agitation. The touch of a hand on his arm had him jumping. He whirled. "Eve!" Her smile faded, and worry filled her blue eyes. "What's the matter?"
"I need to get out of here.
"I'm ready to go any time."
I need to be alone."
As much as he wanted to hold her tight and never let her go, the stronger urge was to flee.
"I'll text later."
"You okay?" Her gaze searched his face. "You're not okay. I'm going with you."
"Eve,"
he began.
I...
"Anson, whatever this is, I'm here for you. If you don't want to talk, that's cool. If it will help to tell me what's troubling you, I'll listen." Her hand curved around his, and she gave it a squeeze. "What I won't let you do is face whatever this is alone." I'm almost at the end of my list. June tightened her hold on Cameron's arm as they left the park and headed toward the side street to his car. "Once I cross off these last few names, I have nowhere else to go."
"At least you'll know you gave it your all."
Cameron knew it was a meaningless platitude, but he wasn't sure what else to say. June had done everything in her power and more to find who'd hit and killed her sister. "I followed every lead." She blew out a frustrated breath. "I turned over every stone."
"The problem is, there weren't that many stones for you to turn over."
June nodded her agreement. They reached the car, but instead of getting inside, June rested her back against the passenger door. "I keep hoping that someone saw something. Anything. Everything I've read about solving crimes says that often all it takes is finding one clue or someone recalling one little thing to crack an investigation wide open." Cameron saw no need to mention that she didn't have that clue or that someone. From the dejected look on her face, she already knew that.
"Where do you go from here?"
"I'm going to contact the last 3 names on my list this week. Then, if I still have nothing, I'm going to have to speak with my mother. I'm going to tell her I was unable to find any answers, and it's time to give up hope of finding the person who ran down Aubrey." Cameron moved to her side, resting his back against the car's shiny surface as she watched 2 sisters playing in a yard. At least, Cameron assumed they were sisters. Both had red hair, and the older one, who looked to be about 7, was a head taller than the other girl. They were running through a sprinkler in their swimsuits and shrieking. His family had used sprinklers, Cameron recalled, eons ago when they'd lived in Silver Creek. His lips curved, remembering how he and JR would lift the oscillating sprinkler to focus the spray directly on Nyla's face. Nyla had always been fierce. Her shrieks of outrage and threats to do them great bodily harm had usually drawn their mother, and occasionally their father, outside. The mistake he and JR had always made was in sticking around. If they hadn't been there when Mom or Dad arrived, Nyla wouldn't have told, and they'd have gotten away with it. A thought struck Cameron, and he turned to June.
"Did the PI or your contact with the police give you the names of any bystanders?"
"Bystanders?" June pulled her brows together. "It was miserable out that night. There are no sidewalks in the area, and according to the police, that roadway didn't get much traffic."
"There are always people who like to gawk,"
Cameron told her.
"I read somewhere that perpetrators of a crime often go back to view the scene."
"I've heard of that in relation to other crimes?" June's eyes now held a speculative gleam. "I'd never thought to ask Gary if there were any gawkers around that night."
"It's another avenue."
She turned and kissed his cheek. "Thank you."
"What did I do?"
"You allowed me to hope, for just a little while longer, that I might be able to find an answer after all." "If you don't want to give me their names, could you at least contact them and, take a second look?" June ignored Gary's exhalation of breath. She knew he wished she'd let this go, but she couldn't, not until she'd turned over every last stone.
"What I'm trying to tell you is there weren't any onlookers. You've been to that area? There are no sidewalks, or really any good place for anyone to gather."
Gary gazed down at his hands, then looked back at June.
"I know you don't want to hear this, but I think you've reached the end."
After a long moment, June nodded, the sounds of children playing in the park at odds with the somber mood on the bench where she and Gary sat. "That's what Cameron said when I contacted the last 3 on my list and got nothing." June's lips twisted. "I told him if you didn't come through with any names, I was done."
"Ah, Junie."
Gary's voice softened.
"I'm sorry this didn't end as you hoped. As we both hoped. I wanted answers too. Aubrey, well, she was special. Whoever hurt her deserves to be punished."
"Will you promise to keep me informed if any new information comes to light?"
"It's not—"
"I understand. It's a long shot, Gary, especially after all this time. But please, please, just promise me if anything new comes in on this case, you'll let me know." He nodded.
"You'll be the first one I call."
Chapter 7. Anson paced the floor of his living area while Eve sat quietly on the sofa and watched. She'd kept her promise, not saying anything on the drive to his place or the ride up in the elevator.
"June's sister, Aubrey."
He whirled to face Eve.
"I saw her car parked on the side of the road the night she was killed."
If he expected Eve to be shocked by the admission, she showed no signs. With her expression watchful, she inclined her head. "And?"
Were they really going to have this conversation in such a calm, logical fashion?
Then again, Eve was a level-headed woman, one who attacked any problem head-on. How had he expected her to respond? Blowing out a breath, Anson raked a hand through his hair and dropped down beside her.
"My parents had forbidden me to attend Sly's parties, but they were at a charity function that night. The girl I was dating was going to be at the party, so—"
"You went?" Eve's lips curved upward at the edges. "Sounds like something I'd have done."
"I got there, and Tiffany and this college guy were all over each other."
Anson shook his head.
"When I saw her with him—"
His voice trailed off. Eve was the first to break the silence. "Awkward."
"Very."
His lips twisted into a semblance of a smile.
"I left right after that. Why get grounded over a party that sucked?"
Eve squeezed his hand in a gesture of support. Would that support vanish when she learned what he'd done? Or rather, what he hadn't done? "Makes sense."
"On my way home, I saw a white car parked on the side of the road."
Anson turned to stare out the window and spoke almost to himself.
"I always stop to help people. That night, I was so concerned about getting home on time, I didn't even consider stopping to see if the person needed help."
Anson returned his gaze to Eve, and when he spoke again, his voice shook with emotion.
"What if Aubrey was in the car, Eve? It was dark, so I couldn't see inside the vehicle, but what if June's sister was sitting there, hoping someone would stop and help? I could have changed the tire for her or given her a ride home. If I had, she'd still be alive."
Surging to his feet, Anson paced for several feet, the tightness in his chest unbearable.
If I'd have thought of someone other than myself, I could have saved her life. But no, I was too worried about possibly getting grounded.
"You were 16, Anson." Rising, Eve moved to his side. "You didn't know what was going on. You didn't know that there was a girl alone in that car. You didn't—"
"I could have checked. I could have seen if anyone was in there, if they were okay, if they needed—"
"Stop right there." Her voice cracked like a whip. He blinked. "Would you tell a 16-year-old kid right now to stop on a deserted road to check out an abandoned car?" Her voice softened, and he saw the compassion in her eyes. "Look, I understand. June lost her sister that night, and her parents lost their daughter. It was a tragedy, a horrible, horrible tragedy. But Anson, what happened to Aubrey isn't your fault.
A better man would have stopped.
Anson met her gaze.
You deserve better than someone like me.
You're a good man. The best I know. Eve wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. And I don't want anyone but you.
If I could just remember,
Anson murmured. She stroked his back. Remember what?
Details.
Frustration filled his voice.
Right now, all I have is an image of a white car. I can't even recall if I passed rescue vehicles headed toward the scene on my way home.
Maybe, and this is just a guess. It's the pressure of trying so hard to recall that night that's blocking the memory.
Maybe,
he acknowledged after a long moment, then added,
You're a wonderful woman, Eve.
She smiled. I'm glad you think so.
You have a big future in front of you.
His gaze, serious and intense, never left her face. Fingers crossed. She lifted her free hand to demonstrate.
Which is why I think we should stop seeing each other.
At age 7, Eve had been riding her bike down a sidewalk on a hill when she'd lost control and slammed into a tree. The impact had knocked all the breath from her lungs. She remembered that horrible feeling. She felt that same way now. Fighting to breathe past the shock, she forced a calm she didn't feel. What did you say? Anson stepped back, not meeting her gaze.
It's the best thing. For both of us.
Hurt warred with anger. Somehow Eve managed to keep those emotions under tight control. How can you say that? Moving to a large window that overlooked the lights of Denver, Anson spoke without turning.
You should go now.
Eve crossed her arms and lifted her chin. I'm not going anywhere.
He whirled. I'm not asking, Eve. I'm telling.
She had 3 brothers. If he thought ordering her around was going to work, it was time for a wake-up call. No. A startled look crossed Anson's face.
No?
No. She gave no justification, no explanation. It was how she'd responded to a guy on the last flight she'd taken who wanted to switch seats with her. A muscle in Anson's jaw jumped.
I don't want you here.
If Eve had thought for a nanosecond that he really didn't want her, that he didn't need her, that he didn't love her, she'd have been out the door in a flash. But Anson wasn't saying he didn't love her, though she didn't doubt he'd say something like that to make her go. Instead, she had the feeling he thought he was looking out for her in some crazy, self-sacrificing way. I'm not going until you tell me what's going on. She stepped to him. I love you, Anson. She hadn't meant to say the words at this moment, but now they were out there.
I love you too.
Wrapping his arms around her, he pulled her tight against him for several wonderful seconds. He rested his cheek against the top of her head.
It's why you can't be with me.
Somewhere in his troubled soul, that kind of logic made sense, which was why Eve didn't argue. In time, he would tell her all his fears. At this moment, Anson didn't need words. He needed comfort. He needed to know she was in his corner. Forget about all of that now.
I can't forget.
You need to relax. I can help you do that, right here in the privacy of your own home. Confusion clouded his eyes until she trailed a finger up his arm, then kissed his neck. When I'm with you, the world outside simply ceases to exist. Heat flared in his green eyes, but he shook his head.
I don't want to use you.
How can it be using me if I want it too? She met his eyes with a steady gaze. The only thing I want at this moment is to be with you, to kiss you and touch you and hold you close, and never let go. Though the thought remained unspoken, it was the truth. If he thought he could push her out of his life for her own good, well, he didn't know her as well as he thought he did. Anson woke the next morning, naked, with one arm wrapped around Eve. Her silky dark hair spilled over his arm, and long lashes fanned her cheeks. He didn't want to push her away. He simply wanted her to be with the kind of man she deserved, an honorable man who looked out for others and did the right thing. If I had stopped that night, would Aubrey still be alive? The question kept circling in his brain, scraping against his thoughts like a rusty nail. Eve stirred, and her eyelids fluttered open. She looked up at him, and her lips curved in a slow smile. "Good morning." He trailed a finger down the softness of her cheek. Then, giving in to the love he felt for her, he bent his head and kissed her. Her arms moved to encircle his neck. "All mine." When he started to pull back, she tightened her hold and shook her head. "I'm not letting you go." The clear blue of her eyes told him she wasn't referring to their current position. "Let's get dressed," he told her. "Then we'll talk." "Let's talk now." Naked, and with that piercing gaze fixed on him, Anson felt more exposed than he'd ever felt in his life. This woman wasn't one he could push aside. Because she loves me. The irony that she'd become the best part of his life at the worst possible time wasn't lost on him. "Come on, Anson, what's the rush? Just lay your head next to mine for a few more minutes." Her soft voice wrapped around his heart. Though he knew it would only be postponing the inevitable, he did as she asked. Grabbing the sheet, she pulled it over him, then took his hand and linked their fingers, sighing in contentment. "This," she murmured, "is what I like." Having her next to him, supporting him, loving him, was what he liked. Feeling the comfort of her touch steadied him, even as a wave of sadness washed over him. "You say you trust me." Eve spoke in a low, soothing tone. "So share with me your deepest fears." "It's better if you tell me," Eve finished. He swallowed hard. "I still worry, that if I had stopped, I could have prevented what happened to her. That doesn't make me a good man, Eve. You deserve the best." The pronouncement hung in the air for several long seconds. Rolling to her side, Eve faced him. There were so many things she could have said, beginning with reminding him of all the points she'd made last night. She remained silent. "I don't want to hurt you." "Then don't push me away." She kept her gaze steady on his. "You and I can handle anything, as long as we're together. Which means no shutting each other out." He stared at her for a long time, then offered a reluctant nod. "Okay." She gave him a swift kiss. "I need more coffee." "I need another kiss." Eve grinned and looped her arms around his neck. "Now that's something I can get behind." Over coffee, Eve mentioned to Anson that one of her English teachers in college had encouraged students to journal their feelings as a way to free their thoughts. They took a few minutes to do some online research on the topic. They read that writing down the details about a particular event was a good way to free buried memories. Anson jotted everything he could recall from that night. Now, it was time for the next step. One of the articles had described using sensory triggers that activated the five senses to resurrect memories of a moment. Actions such as wearing the same clothing, listening to the same music, and eating the same foods could be triggers. Anson glanced down at the jeans, graphic t-shirt, and hoodie he wore, his normal attire of 10 years ago. Tonight, he and Eve would recreate that long-ago night. They would start by going to Sly's house. On the drive down West Morrison, they'd listen to the same music that would likely have been blaring from his car's sound system back then. Anson only hoped this trip down memory lane sparked some memories. Anson left his office at Lighthouse at 5. Once rush hour was over, he and Eve would begin their adventure. Though the accident had occurred after midnight, there was no point in waiting until that time of night, since all they needed was for it to be dark outside. While a mix of popular hits from the early 2010s blared from overhead speakers, Anson stepped into his kitchen to grab some water, just as a knock sounded at the door. Eve, Anson thought, and couldn't keep from smiling. When he opened the door, Eve held up takeout containers of Chinese. "I made dinner." "You're a wonder." Anson lifted the white boxes from her hands. She kissed him. "I know." In minutes, they were sitting at the table, sharing the food. Eve inclined her head. "How was your day?" Anson shrugged. "I went for a long run this afternoon. It felt good." "Sounds like fun." "More of a necessity." At her puzzled look, he explained, "Physical exertion helps with anxiety. I've struggled with it since childhood." "You were anxious as a kid?" He nodded. "When I was 10, I couldn't stop worrying about my parents getting sick and dying. I'd also get stomach aches before tests at school." Using chopsticks, Eve added some beef to her plate. "Did your parents put a lot of pressure on you?" "Not as much as you'd think." Anson took a bite of chicken and chewed thoughtfully. "My dad also struggles with anxiety, so he understood. For him, the anxiety became less of a problem as he got older." "And for you?" Eve set down her chopsticks, giving him her full attention. "I know how to manage it better." His gaze turned thoughtful. "I exercise, eat healthy, for the most part, and make sleep a priority. Those are just some of the coping strategies the counselor in college suggested. Oh, and I avoid alcohol." Eve's dark brows pulled together. "I thought you didn't drink because you don't like the way it makes you feel." "That's true, but alcohol can also cause anxiety and worsen it." Anson gazed past Eve's shoulder as he thought back. "I started drinking a lot in college, thinking it would help me relax. Instead, I felt worse. By my sophomore year, I was a mess and on the verge of flunking out." "What happened?" "My parents intervened, found me a great counselor who was like, 'Look, you have time to turn your life around.'" He let a wisp of a smile lift his lips. "I quit drinking, started using the coping mechanisms he taught me, and found, to my amazement, they helped. That's when I got interested in mental health promotion and prevention." "Which is why you ended up founding Lighthouse after you graduated." Eve shook her head. "I can't believe we've never discussed this before." "I'm not ashamed of my struggles," Anson insisted. "In fact, talking openly about them is part of my mission to destigmatize mental health treatment." Eve nodded, her gaze thoughtful. "Was your father upset that your career path didn't involve going into the family business?" Anson took a moment to answer. "He and my mom know running the brewery isn't where my interest lies. They want me to be happy and do what fulfills me. They are pushing me into politics, and I don't hate the idea, because I think maybe I can help even more people in the area of mental health. It's not the most natural fit, because I'm more of an in-the-trenches guy, but it's growing on me." "Thanks for sharing this with me." Eve reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It helps me understand you better." "Well, now you know it all." "It's a good start. But I think there's still a lot to learn about each other." Eve flashed a smile and gestured to the container containing the Hunan spicy beef he'd barely touched. "Such as, it appears I like my Chinese a lot hotter than you do." Chapter 8. That night, as soon as Anson stopped in the long drive leading to the house where Sly had had his parties, Eve pulled out her phone. Anson's expression turned puzzled. "Who are you calling?" "No one." She swiped the screen. "I'm turning off my phone so we're not interrupted." "You never turn off your phone." "Well, I'm turning it off now. This is important." She dropped her phone back in her bag. "You turn yours off, too." Reaching into the pocket of his hoodie, Anson powered off his phone.
I hope our plan works.
It will.
Confidence filled Eve's voice. Just so you know, if I remember that my actions, or rather lack of action, somehow contributed to Aubrey's death, I'm going to the police to tell them everything.
Slow down here, Anson. Let's take this one step at a time. I know in my heart that you didn't play a part in any of what happened to Aubrey Parker.
Her tone gentled.
So first, let's see what you can remember, and then we can decide what to do about it.
When Anson stepped from the car and stared at the two-story home, Eve rounded the front of his Range Rover Sport to stand beside him. She cocked her head.
Where were Sly's parents during these parties?
According to Anson, Sly had hosted weekly parties at this house all summer. Even though Anson had been in high school and barely old enough to drive, he'd driven out here every weekend. The story was that Sly's parents had purchased the house for him and a few friends to live in while he was in college. Anson shrugged. No idea if that's accurate or not. I only know there were never any adults present.
Did the police ever show up?
Anson paused, his green eyes turning thoughtful. Not that I recall. Eve studied the surrounding landscape.
Possibly because there aren't any neighbors nearby to complain about noise, and there's plenty of space for parking.
Looping her arm through his, Eve focused ahead.
Since we're recreating that night, tell me what you recall about coming here that evening.
I arrived late, so the party was already wall-to-wall people. Once inside, I walked around, looking for Tiffany. I'd texted her I was coming, but she hadn't responded. I found her in the kitchen, making out with some guy I didn't know. I turned around and left.
Eve let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. Did you check out any of the other girls who were there on your way out?
Anson shook his head. No.
You didn't see anyone who looked like June's sister.
Once I saw Tiffany with that guy, all I wanted to do was get out of there.
Eve hesitated. She wanted to push because she knew it was important to Anson that he recall as much as possible of that night. She also knew pushing him could hamper his efforts. Tell me about the weather that night.
Patches of intermittent fog, damp, gray.
2 tiny lines formed between his brows.
I'd just reached my car when I received a text from my mom telling me they'd be home early.
Why would she text you that?
Probably so that when I heard them in the house, I wouldn't think they were burglars. Anson expelled a breath. I'd forgotten that. That was another reason I was in a hurry to get home. He opened his car door. Not much new information.
I bet you'll remember more once we reach where the accident occurred.
I hope so.
In the car, Anson found a place to turn around. As they headed back to the highway, music from that era blared from his sound system. It's a little loud.
Eve resisted the urge to cover her ears. That's how I played it back then.
He smiled.
Drove my parents crazy. I'll turn it down.
Don't,
she said before he could make a move.
The loud music is part of the experience.
He slanted her a sideways glance. You're sure?
Positive.
She refocused on the road and tried to visualize that night.
Okay, so it's foggy and dark, and the music is loud. Is that right?
He nodded, keeping his gaze firmly focused on the road.
You're feeling...
pissed. The word popped out as they reached West Morrison Road. Irritated that I drove all the way out here for nothing. Angry that Tiffany was with that guy. Worst of all, I knew if my parents beat me home, there would be hell to pay.
Good, that's good,
Eve told him. I was also nervous about getting in trouble if my parents found out I left the house when they told me not to. She noticed Anson's grip tightening on the steering wheel.
We're approaching the site of the accident, she said.
I'm going to pull off here, Anson told her, wheeling the Range Rover off the road. There's not much room ahead. Eve's brows pulled together.
I don't understand why Aubrey chose to pull off here.
She might have been afraid she'd ruin the tire if she drove on it flat, or the flat might have made the car hard to steer.
Anson got out of the SUV and met Eve in front of it. Was it raining or just foggy when you approached this area? Eve prompted.
The fog was bad when I left Sly's. I wanted to go fast, but it was difficult to see. It would lift, and then I'd go around a bend and run into it again.
You were driving slower than you normally would have?
I was.
Anson's gaze turned distant.
My headlights picked up the white car when I came around the curve. I recall thinking, what a crazy-ass place for someone to park. I slowed even further. It was lucky I did, because a car pulled onto the road right in front of me and sped off. If I'd been going faster, I might have hit it.
Where was this other car parked before it did that? Eve kept her tone deliberately offhand.
In front of the white car.
What color was it?
Anson stopped walking. After a moment, he shook his head. I don't know.
That's okay.
She placed a supportive hand on his arm.
You've remembered a lot.
The taillights were strange.
Eve waited for him to continue.
The other car was there.
Where he pointed this time had to be at least a good 7 or 8 car lengths ahead of where he'd indicated the white car had been parked. Eve tapped 2 fingers against her lips and considered. Tell me what you think of this scenario. Aubrey is standing by her car, close to the road, obviously too close to the road, maybe trying to flag someone down. The guy hits her, and the impact knocks her onto the shoulder of the road. The driver is freaked, but pulls over to check on her. When he sees she's dead, he calls 911 from her phone, then takes off.
That could be what happened, Anson agreed. If I'd gotten here a little earlier, I might have seen who hit her.
And even if you had stopped, she'd have already been dead. The coroner said she was killed instantly. You couldn't have done anything other than call for help, which had already been done.
Anson expelled a shaky breath. There was nothing I could have done for her.
Not then.
Eve placed a gentle hand on his arm.
But what you've remembered may help June and the police find the person who hit her. Back to the taillights. How were they different?
Slanted. Sideways and up a little.
Anson shook his head.
Off the top of my head, I can't think of any vehicle with those kinds of lights.
Which is good, Eve said. It'll make it easy for you to identify the make and model.
Once I've identified the car, I'll speak with June. I'll tell her all I know, and she can take it from there. If I need to talk to the police, I will.
Sounds like an excellent plan.
Thanks for coming here with me, Eve, for pushing me to do this.
His gaze searched her face.
I was scared, but you had faith.
I love you, Anson. I know who you are as a person, and you don't have it in you to do something so terrible as flee the scene of a fatal hit and run, even at 16. That's how much faith I have in you, and why I'll always support you, no matter what. Chapter 9. Since Eve had taken an Uber to his place, Anson drove her home to Silver Creek. They were both shocked to see the place crawling with paparazzi.
I wonder what this is about,
Anson said. A star Grizzlies player probably got caught cheating on his wife with a pop star.
They wouldn't be hanging out here for that. Aren't you the Driscoll most popular with the Paps?
Maybe, but my phone would be blowing up if this had anything to do with me. Glad we can avoid these guys by going through the security gate into the parking garage. Then you can kiss me goodbye, and I expect you to make it good. Laughing, he delivered on her expectations, then headed home, feeling more relaxed than he had in days. It wasn't until he pulled into his parking space that he realized he'd turned his phone off hours ago. Pulling it from his hoodie, he powered it on, and regretted it when he saw the 1,000,000 missed calls and texts from Jerome. So much for a peaceful evening looking at images of taillights. He opened the first text.
Problem. Need to speak with you. Now. Where are you? Answer your phone. This is serious. Don't speak to anyone before you speak to me. I warned you about Eve.
A link was included with that last one. Anson frowned. Before he could consider following the link, his phone rang, and Anson saw it was his campaign manager.
Anson, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for the last 2 hours. I was with Eve. What's going... Eve, of course. Did you look at the link I sent you? I saw it, but I haven't checked it out yet. You know I never open random links. This isn't random. This is a disaster. You need to meet me at campaign headquarters. Now. Jerome, what is going on? If Eve is in trouble, Eve is the trouble. And what's going on is I'm trying to save your career. Listen to me, Anson. If you care at all about your future, about helping the people you say you want to help, then you need to stay away from Eve Driscoll.
This has been The One I Want by Cindy Kirk, narrated by Amy McFadden, a member of SAG-AFTRA. Copyright 2022 by Cynthia Rutledge. Production copyright 2022 by Cynthia Rutledge.